The Galactic Council chamber was brighter than usual that day. Hundreds of alien leaders sat in a wide circle made of silver metal and living crystal. In the center of the room, a large hologram floated in the air. It showed maps, star systems, fleet numbers, and military strength rankings. One name was highlighted in soft blue light. Earth. Humanity. A tall Zorvax commander stepped forward. His armor was dark red, polished, and heavy. His voice echoed through the chamber. He said humans were not a threat. He said they were divided by politics, culture, and old arguments. He said their ships were slow and their weapons were outdated. He said their fleets were small compared to real galactic powers. A few members of the council made low sounds of agreement. Some even laughed. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for less than a century. They traded well. They negotiated carefully. But they did not show power. And in a galaxy ruled by power, that meant weakness. The council's military analysts presented the numbers again. Human fleet size, limited. Heavy capital ships, few. Planetary defense systems, average. Offensive expansion, none. The conclusion was simple. Humanity was declared militarily irrelevant. The vote passed quickly. No one asked for further review. No one asked what humans might be hiding. In a quiet corner of the chamber stood the human ambassador. He did not argue. He did not shout. He did not defend his species with emotional words. He simply watched. His face remained calm. His hands were folded behind his back. He listened as species after species dismissed humanity as unimportant. When the session ended, he sent only one message back to Earth. They have made their decision. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. A small human mining colony near the outer border of Zorvax space went silent. It was not an important world. It had no strong military presence. Only miners, engineers, and a small defense fleet. The Zorvax Empire had moved into the system without warning. They believed it would be an easy show of dominance. A message was sent from the Zorvax flagship to the colony. Surrender and accept Imperial control. No reply came from the humans. The Zorvax commander smiled. He ordered the fleet to advance. Then everything changed. The first Zorvax destroyer exploded without warning. No visible attacker. No missile trail. Just a flash of light and fire. Seconds later, 3 more ships were torn apart by precise kinetic strikes from unknown directions. Confusion spread across the Zorvax formation. Sensors searched for enemy vessels, but found nothing large enough to threaten a fleet. Then the asteroid belt surrounding the mining colony began to move. It was not natural movement. Hidden thrusters activated. Mining platforms detached and revealed heavy rail cannons beneath civilian structures. Cargo haulers split open and released swarms of armed drones. The humans had turned the entire system into a trap. The Zorvax fleet tried to retreat, but their navigation systems began to fail. Their communication signals were jammed. Supply ships at the back of the formation suddenly lost power as cyber attacks spread through their networks. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. When it was over, the Zorvax fleet was gone. Not damaged, not scattered, gone. Every ship destroyed, every escape route sealed. The mining colony remained standing. 1 hour later, a single transmission was broadcast to the Galactic Council. The same human ambassador appeared on the screen. His voice was calm and steady. "We were dismissed," he said. "We will not be erased." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, leaders stared at their screens in disbelief. The Zorvax Empire immediately denied the scale of the loss. They called it a minor skirmish, a surprise attack, an unlucky patrol group. But private reports began to circulate among Council intelligence networks. The numbers did not match the official statement. 12,000 Zorvax ships were listed as destroyed or missing. 12,000 in a single system. The Council chamber reopened in emergency session. This time there was no laughter. Analysts reviewed sensor fragments recovered from distant observation posts. They saw coordinated human movements. Perfect timing. Defensive structures hidden for years under peaceful mining operations. Supply routes mapped and targeted before the battle even began. It did not look like a desperate defense. It looked planned. The Zorvax commander who had spoken against humanity 3 months earlier stood before the council again. His armor was damaged now. His voice was harder. He demanded full military authorization to strike human space directly. He promised swift victory. He promised to restore honor. But even as he spoke, new casualty updates appeared in the hologram. Additional Zorvax ships had been lost along border regions. Small patrol groups, logistics convoys, fuel carriers, all gone without clear engagement reports. The pattern was forming. Humans were not fighting large open battles. They were cutting arteries. They were targeting movement, supply, and communication. They were fighting smart. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. For decades, the Zorvax Empire had expanded without serious resistance. No one had ever challenged them like this, and certainly not a species labeled irrelevant. The human ambassador did not attend the emergency session. Instead, he sent a short written statement. Humanity does not seek war, but we prepare for it. Always. Behind the calm words was a deeper truth the galaxy had failed to see. Humans had studied every major conflict in galactic history since the day they joined. They had run simulations quietly. They had built defenses inside civilian industries. They had trained not just soldiers, but engineers, programmers, and logistics experts for planetary defense. They did not build the biggest fleet. They built the most adaptable one. As the emergency session continued, a final report arrived from neutral observers stationed near the destroyed mining colony. The observer confirmed the casualty count. 12,000 Zorvax ships lost. Human losses minimal. The chamber fell silent. No one laughed now. The word irrelevant slowly disappeared from the central hologram. In its place appeared a new assessment label. Strategic threat level, rising. Far away, on Earth, military commanders watched the same numbers appear on their own screens. No cheers filled the rooms. No celebration. Only focus. The first phase had worked exactly as planned. And this was only the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council did not end with shouting. It ended with silence. The word irrelevant had disappeared from the display, but no one replaced it with anything else. No one wanted to admit they had made a mistake. The Zorvax Empire moved first. Pride would not allow them to step back. Within days, they deployed 3 full war fleets toward human border systems. These were not patrol groups. These were battle armadas built to crush resistance. Heavy cruisers, carrier platforms, siege ships, and support vessels moved in tight formation. The message was clear. The Zorvax would not tolerate humiliation. Across human space, there was no panic. News of the mining colony battle had already spread. Civilian broadcasts remained calm. Trade routes continued. Planetary life went on as normal. But behind the calm surface, something else was happening. Human command centers activated long-prepared contingency plans. Reserve fleets moved quietly between systems. Civilian transport ships changed routes without public explanation. Deep space sensor arrays powered on in sectors that had been inactive for years. Humanity did not rush forward to meet the Zorvax fleets in open battle. They did something stranger. They stepped back. Border stations were evacuated before the Zorvax arrived. Outposts powered down. Defensive satellites went dark. To Zorvax commanders, it looked like fear. It looked like retreat. The first Zorvax fleet entered the Helios Corridor, a narrow chain of systems connecting outer human colonies to inner space. The path was strategically important. If the Empire captured it, they could move directly toward Earth. The fleet advanced in tight formation, scanning for hidden mines or ambush signals. They found nothing. No resistance. No traps. The corridor looked empty. The Zorvax commander reported to the council the humans were running. Laughter slowly returned to a few corners of the chamber. Maybe the first battle had been luck after all. Then the supply ships at the back of the Zorvax formation stopped responding. At first, engineers assumed system glitches. But within minutes, fuel transfer systems shut down. Navigation software began feeding false coordinates. Internal communications became scrambled. A virus was spreading through the fleet network. Human cyber units had been waiting for this exact moment. Months earlier, human intelligence teams had infiltrated trade networks used by Zorvak's logistics contractors. Small pieces of malicious code had been planted deep inside standard maintenance updates. The code stayed hidden, silent, invisible. Until now, as the fleet moved deeper into the corridor, the virus activated fully. Support vessels drifted out of formation. Two cruisers collided when their navigation systems failed. Panic began to rise. The commander ordered manual overrides, but that created another problem. Zorvak's fleets relied heavily on central command coordination. Manual control reduced their reaction speed. That was when the first human strike group appeared. Not a massive armada, just 12 fast-attack ships emerging from behind a gas giant. They did not engage the heavy cruisers directly. They targeted the drifting supply ships. Railgun fire tore through fuel reserves. Explosions lit up the dark space behind the Zorvak's fleet. Then the human ships disappeared back into the shadow of the planet. The Zorvak's commander split his forces, sending destroyers to hunt the attackers. That was exactly what the humans wanted. The Helios corridor was full of unstable asteroid clusters and debris fields from ancient cosmic collisions. Human ships moved through these fields with precise navigation data gathered over decades. Zorvak's ships did not have that knowledge. One destroyer was crushed when its shields overloaded from unexpected particle density. Another triggered hidden proximity mines disguised as drifting metal fragments. Within hours, the once perfect Zorvak's formation was stretched thin and disorganized. Reports flooded back to the Council. Casualties were rising, not from direct fleet combat, but from confusion, misdirection, and system failures. Meanwhile, in another sector, the second Zorvak's fleet encountered similar problems. Long-range communication buoys stopped transmitting. Refueling stations they expected to capture had been evacuated and rigged to self-destruct. When Zorvak's forces attempted planetary bombardment on an outer human colony, they discovered the population had already relocated underground. Decoy structures absorbed the attack, while hidden defense cannons fired from beneath mountain ranges. The Empire began to understand something uncomfortable. Humans were not reacting emotionally. They were executing a strategy designed long before the first shot was fired. Back in the council chamber, analysts replayed battle data repeatedly. They searched for signs of superior technology. They found none. Human ships were not stronger in raw power. Their weapons were not more advanced. But their coordination was exceptional. Every strike was calculated. Every retreat was intentional. They were not fighting for territory. They were fighting to exhaust the enemy. The third Zorvak's fleet attempted a different approach. Instead of moving through predictable corridors, they used experimental jump routes to bypass outer defenses. For a moment, it seemed clever. They emerged near a lightly defended human agricultural world. But the moment they arrived, something unexpected happened. Civilian satellites in orbit activated into combat mode. What looked like weather monitoring arrays unfolded into missile batteries. Agricultural drones rose from fields carrying explosive payloads. Underground bunkers opened and launched interceptor craft. The Zorvak's had entered another trap. The battle was short but brutal. The fleet managed to destroy several surface installations, but at heavy cost. When they retreated, they left behind burning wreckage scattered across the planet's upper atmosphere. Casualty numbers continued climbing. Not only ships, experienced officers, veteran crews, years of training lost in days. The Zorvak's emperor demanded answers. He asked why a so-called weak species was able to predict every move. Military advisors finally admitted the truth. Humans had never been weak. They had been quiet. They had observed galactic warfare carefully. They understood that large fleets required fuel, coordination, and stable communication. So instead of attacking the sword, they attacked the hand holding it. On Earth, human leadership remained calm. They avoided public celebration. Their goal was not revenge. It was deterrence. Each battle was designed to send a message without overextending their own forces. They knew the Empire would grow desperate. and desperate enemies made mistakes. As the week ended, the total Zorvax casualty numbers reached levels not seen in centuries. The Council no longer spoke of quick victory. They began discussing containment. For the first time, smaller galactic powers quietly contacted human diplomats. They asked questions about defensive alliances. They wanted to understand the strategy. Humanity gave careful answers, but revealed little. In the darkness of space, the first phase of the larger war was unfolding exactly as planned. The Zorvax fleets were still powerful. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer confident. And confidence in war was often the first real casualty. The galaxy had seen many wars before, but this one felt different. It was not loud and dramatic with giant fleets crashing into each other in open space. It was quiet, careful, controlled, and that silence made it more frightening. In the Galactic Council chamber, analysts replayed battle recordings from the Helios corridor and the agricultural world again and again. They slowed down the footage. They zoomed in on human ship movements. They tracked formation patterns. What they saw began to disturb them. Human ships did not move randomly. They moved like parts of a single machine. Each vessel knew exactly where to be. There were no delays in reaction time, no hesitation. Even when retreating, they did it in perfect order, covering each other with precise fire. The Zorvax Empire prided itself on strength and numbers. But humans showed something else: discipline, coordination, planning. The Zorvax Emperor refused to believe that a smaller power could outplay his empire. He ordered a full battle group, one of the oldest and most decorated in Zorvax history, to move directly toward a key human shipyard near the Vega system. This shipyard was known publicly as a civilian construction hub. It built cargo vessels and transport ships. Destroying it would send a strong message. The Zorvax fleet entered the Vega system with overwhelming force. Hundreds of heavy cruisers formed a blockade. Carrier ships launched fighter wings to secure orbit. The system looked quiet. No major human fleet was visible. The Zorvax commander gave the order to begin orbital bombardment. That was when the first surprise happened. The cargo ships, docked at the shipyard, suddenly powered up energy signatures far above civilian levels. Hull panels shifted and opened, revealing hidden weapon systems. Long-range rail cannons extended from what had once looked like loading bays. Missile pods rotated into firing position. The shipyard itself activated layered defense shields that had been disguised as industrial energy grids. The Zorvax fleet hesitated for only a second. But in war, 1 second was enough. Human ships fired first. The initial volley targeted command vessels and electronic warfare ships. Precision strikes knocked out communication relays across the Zorvax formation. Fighter wings lost centralized coordination. Then something even more unexpected happened. Dozens of small civilian maintenance drones launched from the station. To Zorvax sensors, they looked harmless, slow, unarmed. But as they approached, they attached themselves to Zorvax hulls and detonated shaped charges designed to disable engines and shield nodes. Within minutes, several cruisers were drifting powerless in orbit. The Zorvax commander ordered a full assault to overwhelm the defenses with numbers. Heavy plasma cannons fired toward the station. Explosions lit up space around Vega. Parts of the shipyard were destroyed. Human casualties were real. But the humans did not break formation. Reinforcements arrived, not from deep space, but from within the system itself. Asteroids that had appeared natural suddenly changed trajectory. Hidden thrusters ignited. These were not random rocks. They were converted kinetic weapons guided by artificial intelligence. They slammed into tightly packed Zorvax ships, causing chain reactions of explosions. The battlefield turned chaotic. Still, the Zorvax fleet had superior numbers. Slowly, they began pushing through the outer defenses. Victory seemed possible again. That was when the human main fleet arrived. It did not jump in dramatically from hyperspace in one large group. Instead, small strike wings emerged from multiple directions at once. They had been hiding behind moons, inside asteroid shadows, even within the upper atmosphere of a gas giant. Their arrival was synchronized down to the second. They targeted weak points already identified during the battle. Damaged ships, exposed carriers, communication hubs. The Zorvax formation collapsed under pressure from every side. For the first time, the decorated Zorvax battle group began to retreat. But retreating through a system filled with hidden human assets was deadly. Mines activated along exit vectors. Long-range artillery platforms fired from distant orbital positions. The Vega system became a trap. Hours later, what remained of the Zorvax fleet escaped with heavy losses. The human shipyard was damaged but still operational. More importantly, the message was clear. Humanity's industrial worlds were not soft targets. They were fortresses in disguise. Across the galaxy, smaller empires watched the footage with growing concern. Humans were using ordinary infrastructure as layered defense systems. Trade hubs were weapons. Mining colonies were fortifications. Agricultural worlds were hidden military bases. The line between civilian and military had blurred in a way no one expected. Back in the council chamber, the updated casualty numbers appeared. The Vega engagement alone had cost the Zorvax Empire thousands more ships. Experienced officers were lost. Entire squadrons wiped out. Meanwhile, human losses were measured, controlled, and strategically acceptable. The phrase strategic threat level rising was quietly updated to high. The Zorvax Emperor grew impatient. He demanded to know how humans were predicting fleet movements so accurately. Intelligence reports finally delivered an uncomfortable truth. Humans had spent decades mapping common Zorvax tactical behavior. They studied historical battles. They identified patterns in formation choices, retreat strategies, and command structure decisions. Humans did not need to guess what the Empire would do. They already knew. On Earth, military planners reviewed the Vega battle calmly. It had gone as expected. Losses were within projected ranges. Defensive layers had performed well. Phase 2 of their long-term strategy was ready to begin. Humanity understood something the Zorvax still did not. This war would not be won by destroying the largest number of ships. It would be won by breaking the enemy's confidence and stability. And confidence was already cracking. In Zorvax territory, whispers began among officers. Some questioned the Emperor's aggressive orders. Others worried that the humans were always one step ahead. Supply shortages were starting to appear due to constant losses of logistics vessels. Shipyards inside the Empire were working at full capacity, but replacing experienced crews was harder than replacing metal hulls. The war was no longer a simple punishment of a weak species. It was becoming a test of endurance. And humanity had prepared for endurance from the very beginning. As the week ended, a quiet transmission left Earth and spread across neutral systems. It was not a threat. It was not propaganda. It was a simple statement. Humanity defends. Humanity adapts. Humanity endures. In the dark between stars, fleets repositioned again. The galaxy began to understand a difficult truth. Humans were not fighting to win quickly. They were fighting to win completely. And the real shock of the casualty numbers was only just beginning. The Vega battle changed the tone of the war. The galaxy no longer saw humanity as a lucky defender. Now they saw a pattern. Every system the Zorvax attacked turned into a layered trap. Every civilian structure became a weapon. Every retreat led into another ambush. But the most dangerous part was not the battles themselves. It was what humans did after them. They did not chase the broken Zorvax fleets. They did not celebrate victories publicly. Instead, they moved quietly into the next phase of their strategy. On Earth, inside a secure command facility buried deep under a mountain range, human leaders activated what they called Phase 2. This phase had never been shared with the public. It had been planned long before the mining colony was attacked. While the galaxy focused on fleet engagements, humans shifted their attention towards something more important: production. Zorvax shipyards were the heart of their empire. Massive orbital factories built warships at high speed. Automated construction rings worked without rest. As long as those shipyards operated safely, the empire could replace its losses. So humans changed their target. Instead of attacking fleets directly, they began attacking infrastructure. The first strike was subtle. A Zorvax fuel refinery in a remote system experienced a reactor malfunction. Engineers believed it was a technical failure. Days later, a separate weapons manufacturing station suffered a catastrophic systems error. Then a navigation satellite network went offline across 3 sectors. At first, these incidents seemed unrelated, but human cyber divisions were coordinating them carefully. Years earlier, during peaceful trade relations, human software engineers had provided maintenance tools and logistics programs to various Zorvax contractors. Those tools had hidden backdoors. They remained inactive until Phase 2 began. Now, with precise timing, those hidden access points were activated. Production lines slowed. Automated drones miscalculated assembly sequences. Critical components failed inspection tests repeatedly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. Just constant disruption. Zorvax ship output dropped by 15% in 1 week. Then 20. Then 30. The Empire responded by increasing military patrols around key industrial systems. But humans did not rely only on cyber warfare. Small strike teams began targeting supply convoys deep inside contested zones. These were not massive fleet battles. They were quick, surgical operations. Human stealth frigates would appear briefly, disable escort vessels, destroy cargo carriers, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. The pattern became clear. Zorvax fleets were winning some direct engagements now. They had adapted slightly to human traps. But even when they won space battles, they could not maintain momentum. Fuel shortages forced them to pause. Ammunition reserves ran low. Replacement ships arrived slower each week. In the Galactic Council chamber, tension grew heavier. The casualty numbers still shocked everyone, but a new statistic appeared beside them. Production decline percentage. It was climbing steadily for the Zorvax Empire. Meanwhile, human production rates had quietly increased. Civilian factories across human worlds shifted into dual-use manufacturing. Commercial shipyards built transport vessels by day and modular defense platforms by night. Mining colonies increased raw material output by 20%. The most surprising discovery came when independent observers reported that over 60% of human civilian ships had been designed with hidden military conversion capability. Cargo holds could be converted into missile bays. Structural reinforcements allowed installation of heavy weapons. Communication arrays could switch into encrypted combat coordination mode instantly. Humanity had never separated civilian life from defensive readiness. They had prepared their entire society for survival without making it look like militarization. The Zorvax Emperor grew furious when he learned about the production sabotage. He ordered immediate countermeasures. Entire sectors were placed under strict military control. Civilian contractors were investigated. Some were arrested under suspicion of human collaboration. Fear began spreading inside the empire. Workers became nervous. Engineers made more mistakes under pressure. Production slowed even further. Back on Earth, human commanders watched the economic data more closely than battle footage. They knew wars were not decided only by destroyed ships. Wars were decided by endurance and resources. And the Zorvax Empire was bleeding resources faster than it realized. In one bold operation, human intelligence units executed a direct strike on a major Zorvax orbital shipyard. Not with a massive fleet, but with infiltration. Months earlier, a disguised cargo vessel had delivered what appeared to be standard industrial equipment. Hidden within it were compact sabotage devices. On the night the devices activated, construction scaffolds collapsed. Docked warships suffered internal explosions. The shipyard did not explode dramatically, but it shut down completely. Repairs would take months. The news hit the council like another shockwave. The Zorvax Empire, once unstoppable, was now struggling to maintain its industrial core. Smaller galactic powers began reconsidering their political positions. Some quietly opened communication channels with human diplomats. They asked about trade agreements and defensive pacts. Humanity responded calmly. offering stability and cooperation rather than domination. The contrast between the two powers became clear. The Zorvax ruled through fear and force. Humans fought with patience and calculation. On the battlefield, Zorvax fleets continued launching offensives to prove their strength. One large assault managed to destroy a human border station completely. The Empire celebrated the victory loudly. But analysts noticed something strange. The destroyed station had been evacuated days before. It contained outdated equipment. Its loss did not slow human operations at all. It was bait. Humans were controlling the pace of the war. They were choosing where to absorb damage and where to strike back. As weeks passed, the casualty numbers told only part of the story. Yes, the Zorvax had lost more ships overall. But the deeper problem was hidden in logistics reports, economic forecasts, and morale assessments. Zorvax officers were exhausted. Crews rotated too quickly due to losses. Training new personnel could not keep up with demand. Confidence continued to drop. Meanwhile, human forces rotated smoothly. Reserve units replaced frontline ships without disruption. Civilian morale remained steady because planetary governments communicated clearly and calmly. The war had entered a new stage. It was no longer about quick dominance. It was about sustainability. And sustainability was something humanity had quietly mastered. In the final session of that week, the Galactic Council updated its official war assessment. The words were chosen carefully. The conflict is no longer a limited border engagement. It is a systemic destabilization of a major galactic power. For the first time in centuries, the Zorvax Empire looked vulnerable. And for the first time since joining the galaxy, humanity looked inevitable. The Zorvax Empire had reached its limit of patience. Casualty numbers were rising. Production was falling. Smaller empires were beginning to question Zorvax strength. Pride could no longer accept slow defeat. The Emperor made a decision that would define the war. He declared total war. This was not just another fleet deployment. This was everything. Every reserve ship, every hidden armada, every veteran commander recalled to service. The Empire would strike directly at the heart of humanity. Earth. The announcement shook the galaxy. Even species that disliked humans felt uneasy. Attacking a homeworld was different from border raids. It was symbolic. If Earth fell, humanity would lose morale. If Earth survived, the Empire would lose face completely. The Zorvax gathered the largest fleet seen in centuries. Millions of ships assembled in waves across staging systems. Heavy siege platforms capable of planetary bombardment moved to the front lines. Carrier groups filled space like dark clouds blocking starlight. The Emperor broadcast a message across open channels. Humanity will learn its place. On Earth, the message was received without panic. Human leaders had predicted this escalation from the beginning. They knew that pride would push the Empire toward a direct assault, and they had prepared for it for decades. Civilian populations were quietly relocated into deep planetary shelters. Orbital traffic was reduced. Space around Earth appeared calm, almost peaceful. When a massive Zorvax fleet finally entered the Sol system, it was overwhelming. Their ships stretched across millions of kilometers. Even neutral observers watching from distant systems felt the weight of that force. The Zorvax commanders believed no defense could stop such numbers. As the fleet advanced toward Earth orbit, something unexpected happened. Human outer defense stations powered down. Orbital platforms went silent. It looked like surrender. Some Zorvax officers smiled. They believed fear had finally broken humanity. The first wave of Zorvax ships moved deeper into the system, confident and tightly grouped. That was when Phase Earth activated. Hidden satellites positioned between Mars and Jupiter came online simultaneously. They had been disguised as scientific research probes and communication relays for years. Now they revealed massive energy signatures. Long-range kinetic weapons fired from extreme distances, targeting the center of Zorvax formations. Entire columns of ships were pierced before shields could fully respond. Then the asteroid belt itself became a battlefield. Mining facilities hidden within asteroids activated propulsion systems. Massive rocks were redirected into collision paths with incoming fleets. Automated defense grids turned space into a maze of crossfire. Zorvak's commanders attempted to reorganize, but the scale of the fleet worked against them. Their numbers limited maneuverability. Ships collided while attempting emergency course changes. Fighter squadrons launched to secure safe zones, only to encounter swarms of autonomous human drones programmed for coordinated attacks. The deeper the Empire pushed toward Earth, the more resistance intensified. Mars' orbit lit up with heavy artillery fire. Defense platforms hidden on its moons activated rail cannons that had been buried beneath surface rock. Near Earth itself, an invisible shield grid came online. It was not a single barrier, but layers of overlapping defense satellites forming a protective web around the planet. Zorvak's siege ships began planetary bombardment attempts. Plasma beams struck the outer shield layers. Explosions filled Earth's orbit with fire and debris. But the shields held long enough for human counterattacks to focus on the largest threats. Precision strikes disabled siege platforms one by one. Hours passed. The battle grew chaotic. Zorvak's numbers were still massive, but losses were climbing faster than projected. What they believed would be a swift, crushing victory had turned into the most complex battle in galactic history. Then the final surprise revealed itself. From behind Earth's moon, the main human fleet emerged. It was larger than any fleet humanity had previously displayed. For years, it had remained hidden in deep orbit construction yards beyond normal sensor range. Now it moved in perfect formation, engines burning bright against the darkness. The fleet did not charge recklessly. It executed coordinated strike patterns targeting weak command nodes already damaged by earlier defenses. Human ships focused on disabling communication carriers and centralized control vessels. Zorvak's fleet coordination began to fail. Without unified command, their massive armada became fragmented. Smaller groups fought independently, losing the advantage of overwhelming numbers. The casualty counter across the galaxy began updating in real time. Millions of ships engaged, thousands destroyed every minute. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Neutral observers struggled to process the scale. For the first time, the Zorvak's Emperor realized this was not simply a battle. It was a mistake. By committing everything to one attack, he had walked directly into the most prepared defensive system in human space. Earth had never been exposed. It had always been the strongest fortress humanity possessed. After 2 full days of continuous combat, Zorvak's forces began withdrawing. The retreat was disorderly. Human forces did not chase aggressively. They targeted only retreating heavy weapons and damage carriers to ensure the threat was reduced. When silence finally returned to the Sol system, space was filled with drifting wreckage. Earth still stood. Its cities were intact. Its population safe. The Human Defense Network had performed exactly as designed. Across the galaxy, the updated casualty numbers appeared before the Galactic Council. They crossed 1 million destroyed Zorvak ships. The chamber remained completely silent. No laughter. No excuses. The scale of loss was undeniable. The Empire had gambled everything on overwhelming force. Humanity had answered with preparation, patience, and layered defense. On Earth, there were no public celebrations. Leaders addressed the population calmly. Repairs began immediately. Fallen soldiers were honored quietly. The message to the galaxy was simple and clear. Humanity would not expand recklessly. Humanity would not seek conquest. But humanity would survive. And any force that threatened Earth directly would pay a price too high to imagine. The war was no longer about proving relevance. It was about redefining power. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand that power did not always belong to the loudest empire. Sometimes it belonged to the one that prepared in silence. The battle for Earth changed everything. The Zorvak's empire had thrown its full strength into one massive attack, and it had failed. The galaxy waited for humanity to celebrate loudly or launch a revenge invasion. But humanity did neither. Instead, something even more unsettling happened. The numbers were released, not by the Zorvax, not by rumor, but by independent observers and neutral monitoring stations across multiple systems. The casualty reports were verified and confirmed. Over 1 million Zorvax ships destroyed. Hundreds of thousands more heavily damaged. Experienced officers lost. Entire command divisions erased. The scale of loss was beyond anything seen in modern galactic history. In the Galactic Council chamber, the holographic display glowed with cold statistics. Fleet loss percentage, production deficit, crew shortages, resource strain. Every number pointed in the same direction. The Zorvax Empire was bleeding. Some council members quietly asked a dangerous question. If the Empire could lose this much in a single campaign, how stable was it really? The Zorvax representatives refused to show weakness. They claimed they still had reserves. They claimed the war was far from over. But behind closed doors, the situation inside their territory was becoming unstable. Shipyards were operating beyond safe capacity. Workers were forced into extended shifts. Recruitment standards for new crew members were lowered to fill empty positions. Training cycles were shortened. Mistakes increased. Meanwhile, humanity moved carefully. They did not launch a full invasion of Zorvax space. They did not attempt to crush the Empire while it was wounded. Instead, they continued targeting infrastructure and supply lines. Human intelligence networks increased pressure on transport routes carrying fuel and raw materials. Small, precise strikes continued to disrupt repair facilities. Each action was limited but effective. The goal was not dramatic destruction. The goal was slow exhaustion. Back on Earth, military analysts reviewed long-term projections. They understood something important. Wars were not won by emotion. They were won by math. And the math now favored humanity. Zorvax production could not replace losses at the current rate. Fuel reserves were declining. Trade partners were growing nervous. Smaller species within the Empire began questioning central authority. The fear that once protected Zorvax control was weakening. In one Zorvax border system, a supply convoy failed to arrive on time for a frontline fleet. The delay forced that fleet to retreat early from an engagement. Human forces did not destroy them. They allowed them to withdraw, knowing the message would spread faster than any propaganda. The Empire could no longer guarantee support. Confidence continued to fall. In the council chamber, updated morale assessments appeared beside casualty data. Zorvax morale was listed as unstable. Human morale remained steady. This surprised many observers. Humanity had taken losses too. Ships destroyed, soldiers killed, colonies damaged. But their society had prepared psychologically as well as physically. Transparent communication kept panic low. Clear defensive goals prevented fear from turning into chaos. On several neutral worlds, public opinion shifted openly. News networks analyzed battle footage and economic data. Experts pointed out the difference in strategy. The Zorvax fought for dominance. Humans fought for survival. Survival was a stronger motivation. Behind the scenes, smaller galactic powers began quietly reaching out to human diplomats. They asked about defensive cooperation. They asked about trade security. They asked about protection guarantees. Humanity responded carefully. They did not demand territory. They did not demand tribute. They offered stability agreements and mutual defense pacts. This approach increased trust quickly. The Zorvax Emperor watched these developments with rising anger. He believed fear was slipping from his control. He demanded a new plan from his military advisors. Some suggested negotiation. Others recommended regrouping and rebuilding. But hardline commanders insisted on escalation. They argued that showing hesitation would encourage rebellion within their borders. The Emperor made another decision. He authorized the preparation of a restricted weapons system. Its existence had been hidden even from parts of the Council. It was powerful, dangerous, and illegal under galactic agreements. Meanwhile, human intelligence detected unusual activity in deep Zorvac space. Increased energy signatures, encrypted communications, restricted ship movements. Analysts on Earth began piecing together the pattern. Something large was being prepared. Something desperate. Humanity adjusted strategy again. Defensive systems were reinforced quietly. Cyber divisions searched for hidden networks linked to secret projects. Long-range reconnaissance probes were redirected toward suspicious systems. Still, human leadership did not show panic publicly. They understood desperation could push the Empire into making a fatal mistake. As weeks passed, the economic gap widened further. Zorvac's industrial output continued declining. Replacement ships were constructed faster, but with less experienced crews and lower quality control. Mechanical failures increased during missions. Small accidents turned into fatal losses. Each mistake fed into the growing narrative that the Empire was weakening. In contrast, human forces rotated personnel efficiently. Civilian industries supported military needs without collapsing consumer stability. Resource allocation remained balanced. The difference between forced war economy and prepared defense economy became clear. Then the next full casualty update was released. It included not only ship losses, but officer ranks and command structure damage. Entire Zorvac's veteran command lines had been erased during the Sol campaign. Leadership gaps were forming. Younger officers with limited experience were being promoted rapidly. This increased unpredictability inside Zorvac's fleets. For the first time, some council members openly questioned whether the Empire could continue the war long-term. The phrase strategic overextension began appearing in official reports. Humanity had not needed to match the Empire ship for ship. They had needed only to survive long enough for the numbers to tell the story. And now the story was clear. The Zorvac's Empire was losing faster than it could recover. On Earth, a quiet meeting took place between top human commanders. They reviewed intelligence about the suspected restricted weapon project. They understood escalation was coming. But they also understood something else. The Empire was no longer fighting from strength. It was fighting from fear. And fear led to reckless decisions. As the galaxy watched, the war shifted into a new and uncertain phase. The casualty numbers had shocked everyone. But the deeper shock was not the destruction. It was the realization that a species once dismissed as irrelevant had outplanned, outlasted, and outcalculated one of the most powerful empires in history. And if desperation drove the Zorvacs to activate something forbidden, the next chapter of the war would be even more dangerous than the last. The war had changed direction. It was no longer only about ships and weapons. It was about influence. It was about trust. It was about who the galaxy believed could provide stability in the future. After the disaster at Earth and the rising casualty numbers, something unexpected began to happen. Smaller empires stopped looking at the Zorvacs with fear. They started looking at humanity with interest. At first, the communication was quiet. A minor trade republic on the edge of contested space sent a private message to Earth. They asked for advice on strengthening planetary defenses. A week later, a mining coalition requested access to human cybersecurity systems. Then a mid-level military alliance asked about joint patrol agreements. None of them wanted war with the Zorvacs. But none of them felt safe anymore either. Humanity answered carefully. They did not demand loyalty. They did not ask for military bases. They offered training programs, defensive technology sharing, and mutual warning networks. The message was simple. We defend ourselves. We can help you defend yourselves. This approach spread quickly. Trust began forming around human strategy. While the Zorvacs ruled through fear of punishment, humans offered protection without control. That difference changed the balance of power more than any battle. In the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere shifted. Zorvac's representatives still spoke loudly, still claimed the Empire was strong. But fewer members reacted with automatic agreement. Some even began challenging their statements with data. Production decline percentages were discussed openly. Morale reports were no longer hidden. The phrase strategic miscalculation appeared in official transcripts. Inside the Zorvac's empire, cracks were widening. Border governors complained about reduced fleet protection. Trade routes were no longer fully secure. Pirates and criminal groups sensed weakness and became more active. The central government responded with harsher control measures. Increased surveillance, forced labor in shipyards, public punishments for officers who failed missions. But fear did not rebuild confidence. It only increased tension. Meanwhile, humanity continued Phase 2 operations quietly. Instead of large battles, they focused on isolating Zorvak's influence. Human diplomats negotiated supply contracts with neutral worlds that previously depended on Zorvak's trade networks. Alternative fuel distribution systems were created. Joint economic projects were launched. Every agreement reduced Zorvak's leverage slightly. It was not dramatic. It was steady. In one key event, a defensive pact was signed between humanity and 3 mid-sized star nations. The agreement stated that if any one member was attacked without cause, the others would provide support. It was not an aggressive alliance. It was protective, but symbolically it was powerful. For centuries, smaller species had accepted Zorvak's dominance as permanent. Now they saw another option. The Zorvak's emperor reacted with anger. He accused humanity of manipulation. He claimed they were building a coalition to surround the empire. Some of his advisors urged negotiation before the situation worsened. Others warned that open diplomacy would appear weak. The emperor chose strength again. He increased fleet patrols near systems that had shown interest in human agreements. It was meant as intimidation. Instead, it pushed those systems closer to Earth. In private military reports, Zorvak's analysts admitted something troubling. Human strategy was not expansion. It was repositioning the galaxy's balance. By offering stability, humanity was reducing the Empire's ability to project fear. And without fear, control weakened. On Earth, leaders observed the shift carefully. They did not rush to declare victory. They understood the Empire was still powerful and dangerous. A wounded force could act unpredictably. Intelligence divisions continued monitoring unusual energy signatures linked to the suspected restricted weapon project. Signs of progress were increasing. Deep space facilities were receiving heavy shipments under military escort. Communications were encrypted beyond standard levels. Something was being prepared. But while the Empire focused on secret escalation, its political position continued to erode. During a major council session, a neutral observer presented an updated influence index. It measured economic strength, military capability, and diplomatic alliances. For the first time in recorded history, the Zorvak's Empire's influence score had dropped significantly. Humanity's had risen just as sharply. The chamber fell silent again. This silence was different from the one after Earth's battle. That silence was shock. This silence was realization. Power in the galaxy was shifting. On several Zorvak's core worlds, citizens began asking quiet questions. Why had the Emperor launched a total war? Why were casualty numbers so high? Why were supply shortages appearing in local markets? Information was controlled tightly, but rumors spread faster than official statements. Some regional commanders began advising defensive posture rather than offensive expansion. They recommended consolidating borders and rebuilding fleets. But the Emperor saw retreat as weakness. He believed one decisive action could restore dominance. That belief pushed him closer to activating the Forbidden Project. In human command centers, analysts noticed increased fleet movement patterns around a classified Zorvak system. Recon drones detected shield arrays expanding around an isolated star. The energy readings did not match normal shipyard construction. The pattern suggested something larger, more powerful, more dangerous. Humanity adjusted quietly again. Defensive grids were recalibrated. Allied systems received updated security protocols. Cyber teams searched for any weakness in Zorvak's encrypted networks. They knew the next stage of the war would not be about fleets alone. It would be about stopping whatever desperate weapon was being prepared. Still, humanity did not abandon diplomacy. Another defensive pact was signed. More trade corridors were secured. Confidence in human stability continued rising. The contrast between calm preparation and aggressive reaction became impossible to ignore. The war had begun with laughter at humanity's weakness. Now, the same galaxy watched as influence shifted toward the species that had once been dismissed. But deep inside Zorvax space, in a system erased from public records, construction continued around a dark structure orbiting a dying star. It pulsed with unstable energy. It was designed for one purpose. If activated, it would not target a fleet. It would not target a base. It would target a system. And if the Emperor chose to use it, the next casualty numbers would shock the galaxy in a way no one was prepared for. Deep inside restricted Zorvax space, far beyond normal trade routes and civilian traffic, a dying red star flickered weakly. Around it, hidden behind layers of heavy shielding and encrypted sensor jammers, a massive structure orbited in silence. It did not look like a shipyard. It did not look like a station. It looked like a weapon. The project had been classified under the highest level of Imperial secrecy. Only the Emperor and a small circle of commanders knew its true purpose. It was called the Starbreaker. Its design was simple in concept, but terrifying in scale. It could trigger a chain reaction inside a star's core, forcing premature collapse. A single activation could erase an entire solar system. Planets, fleets, colonies, everything. The weapon had been forbidden centuries ago under galactic law. No empire was supposed to build such a device again. But the Zorvax Emperor believed the law no longer mattered. He believed fear needed to return to the galaxy. And nothing created fear like the destruction of a star. In the Galactic Council, rumors began circulating about unusual energy spikes in remote Zorvax territory. Independent observers reported heavy fleet protection around a system that had previously been empty. The Zorvax dismissed the reports as routine military exercises. Few believed them. On Earth, human intelligence agencies had already detected the pattern weeks earlier. Long-range probes disguised as debris had drifted close enough to capture fragments of energy signatures. Human analysts studied the data carefully. The readings did not match ship construction or power generation. They matched stellar manipulation theory. The conclusion was clear. The Empire was building a star killer. In a secure underground command center, human leaders faced a serious decision. If the weapon became operational, it could target Earth or one of the newly allied systems. Evacuating entire star systems was impossible. A direct assault on the hidden Zorvax system would risk massive losses. And if the weapon was triggered during an attack, the results could be catastrophic. Humanity chose patience again. They did not mobilize a visible fleet. Instead, they activated infiltration protocols prepared years earlier for extreme scenarios. Human cyber divisions began searching for any connection point into the Starbreaker's control systems. Trade records were reviewed. Old contractor networks were traced. Every small detail mattered. Months earlier, during the early stages of the war, a human software firm had sold advanced cooling regulation programs to a Zorvax energy corporation. At the time, it appeared harmless. But embedded within that software was a dormant access key. The key had never been used. Until now, human cyber teams initiated the infiltration slowly. They did not rush. They allowed small pieces of data to pass through encrypted barriers undetected. Bit by bit, they mapped the weapon's operating system. They discovered safety overrides. They discovered command hierarchies. They discovered something even more important. The Starbreaker required synchronized authorization from 3 high-ranking Zorvax commanders to activate. The Emperor planned to gather them in the hidden system for the final launch sequence. Meanwhile, political pressure inside the Empire continued growing. Production struggles and rising casualties had already weakened morale. If the Starbreaker was used and failed, the consequences would be devastating for Imperial authority. But if it succeeded, fear might restore dominance. The Emperor saw it as the only option left. The Galactic Council sensed escalation. Emergency sessions were held. Some members openly accused the Zorvax of violating ancient agreements. The Zorvax denied everything. But tension filled every chamber. Humanity remained calm publicly. The human ambassador addressed the council with a simple statement. Escalation will not create stability. It will end it. The message was clear without naming the weapon directly. As the activation date approached, the 3 required Zorvax commanders arrived at the hidden system. Heavy fleets guarded the perimeter. Internal security was extreme. The Starbreaker began charging its core. The dying red star pulsed brighter as energy was siphoned into containment fields. Across the galaxy, subtle sensor fluctuations were detected. Human cyber teams moved to the final stage. The embedded access key was activated. Deep inside the weapon's control network, silent instructions began rewriting core protocols. Safety locks shifted positions. Targeting coordinates were redirected into simulation loops. Countdown timers were altered by microseconds. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic. On the day of activation, the Emperor stood on a command platform overlooking the massive structure. He believed this single action would restore fear and end the war. The 3 commanders entered their authorization codes. The Starbreaker's core ignited fully. Energy surged into the star's outer layers. For a moment, it seemed to work. The red star flared violently. Shock waves rippled outward. But then something changed. The control interface flickered. Target confirmation screens froze. Warning symbols appeared across the command displays. The synchronization process failed. The energy containment field destabilized, not outward toward the star, but inward toward the weapon itself. Human cyber teams had redirected the core feedback cycle. Instead of collapsing the star, the energy surge looped back into the Starbreaker's internal systems. Emergency shutdown protocols attempted to engage, but the altered code prevented proper execution. The weapon's massive structure began tearing itself apart from internal overload. Zorvax engineers rushed to override controls manually. It was too late. The Starbreaker exploded in a contained but devastating chain reaction. The dying red star remained intact. The weapon was destroyed. The hidden system was thrown into chaos. Fleet escorts scrambled to contain debris. Communications across Zorvax space erupted in confusion. The Emperor's ultimate gamble had failed. Worse, data fragments from the weapon's system leaked into neutral monitoring networks before being sealed. Proof of the illegal project spread rapidly. In the Galactic Council chamber, the evidence appeared in full view. The forbidden weapon had been real, and it had nearly been used. The silence that followed was heavier than any before. Inside the Zorvax Empire, the reaction was immediate. Some commanders felt betrayed. Others felt relief that the weapon had not succeeded. Whispers turned into open criticism. The Emperor's authority, already weakened by battlefield losses, cracked further. On Earth, human leaders did not celebrate publicly. They simply confirmed one fact internally. The greatest escalation had been prevented without firing a single shot. But they also understood something else. The Empire had crossed a line. And when empires crossed lines and failed, collapse often followed. The destruction of the Starbreaker did more than stop a weapon. It shattered the image of Zorvax control. For decades, the Empire had ruled through strength and certainty. Now the galaxy had seen proof of desperation. They had built a forbidden weapon. They had tried to use it, and they had failed. Inside Zorvax space, shock turned into anger. High-ranking commanders demanded answers. How had the most secret project in Imperial history been sabotaged? How had humans reached into a system protected by the strongest encryption and the largest fleet guard? Suspicion spread quickly. Some accused internal betrayal. Others blamed poor leadership. Trust inside the Empire began to collapse. The Emperor tried to regain control. He ordered immediate arrests of several engineers and cyber officers connected to the Starbreaker project. Public announcements claimed sabotage by traitors. But the explanation did not satisfy many military leaders. They knew the truth was larger. The failure was not just technical. It was strategic. The Empire had underestimated humanity from the beginning. Now that mistake had grown too large to hide. In several outer Zorvax sectors, governors hesitated to follow direct orders from the capital. They requested defensive authority over their own fleets. Some delayed, sending reinforcements to Central Command. Others quietly opened communication channels with neutral systems, seeking backup trade agreements in case imperial supply lines failed completely. The unity that once defined the Zorvax Empire was breaking apart. The Galactic Council watched carefully. Officially, no one interfered, but many members understood what was happening. An empire weakened by war and internal mistrust could fall without direct invasion. Humanity understood this better than anyone. On Earth, military leaders held a private meeting. The Starbreaker had been neutralized. The Zorvax fleets were stretched thin. Their economy was unstable. Their political structure was cracking. Some human commanders suggested launching a full offensive to end the war quickly. But the final decision was different. Humanity would not invade recklessly. Instead, they would tighten the pressure. Human fleets repositioned along key trade corridors, not to attack planets, but to block major supply routes. Strategic choke points were secured with defensive fleets supported by allied systems. Every movement was legal under mutual defense agreements. Every action was justified as protective, not aggressive. The effect was immediate. Zorvax fleets attempting to resupply encountered heavy resistance. Not open war, but firm denial of passage. Trade ships were redirected. Fuel deliveries were delayed. Repair materials failed to arrive on time. The Empire's war machine began to stall completely. Inside Zorvax military headquarters, arguments turned into open conflict. One group of generals demanded a negotiated peace. They believed the Empire could still survive if it accepted reduced influence. Another group insisted on continuing the war to preserve honor. The Emperor refused to consider surrender, but his authority was no longer absolute. A turning point came when a respected Zorvax fleet admiral publicly questioned imperial orders during a strategic briefing. He stated that continuing offensive operations without stable supply lines would lead to total collapse. The statement was recorded and spread quickly through military channels. It inspired others to speak. Soon, entire command divisions were divided in loyalty. Human intelligence observed these developments carefully. They did not interfere directly. They allowed events to unfold naturally. Every day, the Empire remained unstable. Human alliances grew stronger. More star nations signed defensive agreements. Economic partnerships expanded. Stability was shifting away from Zorvax control. Then the first open rebellion occurred. In a distant Zorvax industrial sector, local fleet commanders refused to deploy ships for a new offensive order. They declared their primary responsibility was protecting their own systems from piracy and unrest. The capital labeled it treason, but enforcement fleets sent to discipline them discovered something unexpected. The local forces were well prepared and unwilling to surrender authority. Small internal battles erupted between loyalist and reformist factions. The Empire was now fighting itself. The Galactic Council held another emergency session. Observers presented data showing rapid fragmentation of Zorvax command structures. Influence indexes dropped sharply. Trade networks restructured around human-protected corridors. The balance of power had clearly shifted. On Earth, leaders prepared for the final stage. They understood collapse could create chaos across former Zorvax territory. Uncontrolled regions might fall into piracy or civil war. Humanity began drafting stabilization plans, offering peace negotiations to reformist Zorvax leaders who showed willingness to end hostilities. Then it happened. A coalition of senior Zorvax admirals approached human diplomats through neutral intermediaries. They requested ceasefire discussions, not as conquerors, not as equals, but as survivors seeking stability. The Emperor refused to authorize talks, but his control over the fleets had weakened so much that the admirals acted independently. Loyalist forces attempted to arrest them. Instead, more fleets sided with the reformists. What followed was short but decisive. A limited civil conflict erupted inside core Zorvax space. Human fleets did not invade. They held defensive lines and prevented spillover into Allied systems. Within weeks, the Emperor's central command structure collapsed. He was removed from authority by his own military council. The war that began with laughter at humanity ended with an empire divided and exhausted. Final casualty numbers were released across the galaxy. They were staggering. Zorvak's losses far exceeded original projections. Human losses were significant but sustainable. The difference was not just in numbers. It was in stability. The Empire had broken itself, trying to crush a species it once dismissed. In the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere was completely different from the first session months earlier. There was no laughter, no arrogance, only quiet reflection. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not demanded tribute. They had endured. They had adapted. They had outlasted. And now, as the remains of the Zorvak's empire negotiated surrender, terms with their own reformist leaders, one truth became clear to every species watching. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had changed everything. The Galactic Council chamber was silent again. It was the same chamber where humanity had once been laughed at and declared militarily irrelevant. The same chamber where the word irrelevant had floated above Earth's name. But now the atmosphere was different. No one laughed. No one whispered. In the center of the room, the final war report hovered in cold blue light. The Zorvak's empire had officially requested a full ceasefire. Not a temporary pause. Not a tactical withdrawal. A complete end to hostilities. Across former Zorvak's territory, reformist leaders had taken control of the central government. The Emperor was gone, removed by his own military council after the civil conflict. Loyalist forces had either surrendered or dissolved. The empire that once ruled through fear was no longer united. The casualty numbers displayed before the council were staggering. Millions of ships destroyed. Industrial capacity reduced by nearly half. Entire command structures erased. But the deeper numbers told an even stronger story. Influence ratings had shifted permanently. Trade networks now flowed through human-protected corridors. Defense pacts centered around Earth and its allies. Stability indexes showed one clear result. Humanity had become the anchor of balance in the galaxy. The human ambassador entered the chamber calmly, just as he had on the first day of the war. His expression had not changed. He did not look proud. He did not look angry. He simply stood before the council as the final casualty summary scrolled behind him. A senior council member spoke first. Humanity has demonstrated power beyond our expectations. What are your demands? The question echoed through the chamber. Many expected territory claims, resource compensation, political dominance. That was how galactic wars usually ended. The winner expanded. The loser paid. The ambassador paused before answering. We have no demand for territory, he said. We have no demand for tribute. We require only one thing: stability. Murmurs moved quietly across the chamber. The ambassador continued. The war began because we were dismissed, because strength was measured only by size and fear. We will not repeat that mistake. The reformist Zorvak's delegation, standing on the opposite side of the chamber, listened carefully. They looked different from the proud commanders who had once mocked humanity. Their armor was unpolished, their posture more cautious. They understood their position clearly. They were no longer negotiating from strength. The terms presented by humanity were direct and simple. All offensive fleets would stand down. Remaining Zorvak's war production would be reduced to defensive levels under council observation. Border systems would be stabilized through joint patrol agreements to prevent piracy or power vacuums. No forced annexation, no revenge occupation. In return, humanity would lift trade blockades and assist in rebuilding damaged infrastructure to prevent collapse. The offer surprised many council members. Some had expected harsher conditions. But human strategy had never been about humiliation. It had been about balance. The war had proven a point. There was no need to prove it again. Over the next weeks, ceasefire protocols were signed. Fleet movements slowed. Defense grids returned to standard readiness levels. Reconstruction efforts began in contested systems. Human engineers worked alongside former Zorvax crews to restore damaged stations. The galaxy watched carefully. They expected hidden motives. They searched for signs of expansion. They found none. Instead, they saw efficiency and restraint. On Earth, public broadcasts addressed the population. Leaders acknowledged the cost of the war. Lives lost, ships destroyed, colonies damaged. There was no celebration parade, only remembrance ceremonies and quiet rebuilding. Humanity did not treat victory as glory. They treated it as responsibility. Across neutral systems, political analysts reviewed the entire conflict from beginning to end. One conclusion appeared in nearly every report. Humanity had never been the strongest in raw numbers. They had not possessed the largest fleets at the start, but they had possessed preparation. They had studied history. They had prepared their economy, their infrastructure, and their people for endurance. They had fought only when necessary, and when pushed, they had finished the war without losing control. Months later, the Galactic Council held a final session to officially close the conflict record. The chamber was filled with representatives from species that once doubted humanity. The final war title was entered into the archive. The Conflict of Miscalculation. It was an honest name. The galaxy had miscalculated humanity. The Zorvax had miscalculated humanity. Even humanity had learned from the experience. The human ambassador gave one last statement before the record closed. Strength is not shown by how loudly you threaten. It is shown by how long you endure. We were dismissed once. That will not happen again. But we do not seek fear. We seek balance. The chamber remained silent after his words. Not out of shock this time, but out of understanding. The balance of power in the galaxy had changed permanently. Humanity was no longer the quiet newcomer. They were the steady center. Trade routes adjusted naturally around their alliances. Defense agreements expanded gradually. Trust, built through discipline and restraint, proved stronger than domination through fear. Far from the council chamber, on the edge of former Zorvax space, joint human and Zorvax patrol ships flew side by side for the first time. Not as enemies, not as rivals, but as guardians of fragile peace. The war that began with laughter had ended with respect. The casualty numbers had shocked the galaxy, but the greater shock was the lesson behind them. Humanity had never needed to shout. They had never needed to boast. They had prepared quietly. They had endured patiently. And when the moment came, they had proven something the galaxy would not forget. Humanity was never weak. Humanity was never irrelevant. Humanity was simply waiting.